Welcome to Georgia Highlands College Math 97 and Math 99 video tutorials. In this video segment, we'll be answering the question, how do you divide fractions? Well, the good news is that you never divide fractions. You simply change it to multiplying by the reciprocal of the divisor, so the thing that you're dividing by. So if we look at it in theoretical terms, if we have the fractions a over b and c over d, and we're given the situation a over b divided by c over d, we actually would not do that division. We would leave our dividend, a over b, we change the division to multiplication, and we're multiplying by the reciprocal of the divisor, so we flip that divisor and multiply by d over c. Then we just follow our rules for multiplication, which is multiplying the numerators, multiplying the denominators to get a times d over b times c. Now, a lot of students look at this and say, okay, that's great, I'll accept it, but you don't really understand why it is the way it is. So we're going to look at an example, and then I'm going to explain to you using compound fractions how all this is valid. So let's take a look at an example. Okay, so we have a very simple example here of 2/3 divided by 3/4. And I'm going to state this problem a different way in a moment so that you can see how it works with compound fractions. But if we just apply the rule here, the rule says we don't ever divide. We keep our first fraction, our dividend. We change to multiplication of the reciprocal of the divisor. So I'm going to flip that second fraction and make that 4/3. So now we're back to good old multiplication of fractions. Multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and we get 8/9 as our resulting fraction. So the big question is why? Why is multiplying by the reciprocal the same thing as dividing by a particular fraction? Well, if we take our original example here, 2 divided by 3 divided by 3 divided by 4. So you'll notice I just used a lot of divided bys there. I'll say that again. I can state this same problem as, instead of saying 2/3, calling it that fraction, 2/3 is the same thing as 2 divided by 3. So this is 2 divided by 3 divided by 3 divided by 4. So I'm just going to set up that compound fraction. So we have 2 divided by 3, and then big divided by 3 divided by 4. All right, so we have a compound fraction here. And we all know that you can't leave a compound fraction looking like this. It's just not good form. You need to leave an answer as a single fraction, not a compound fraction. Well, the whole problem is that we have a fraction in our denominator. But if we could somehow make 1 in our denominator, then we'd just be dividing a particular fraction by 1, and it would just be that fraction in the numerator. So if you start thinking back to all your properties of real numbers, whenever you multiply by a reciprocal, you get 1. Well, you just can't go around and multiply by a reciprocal anytime you feel like it, because that changes things. But what you can multiply by anytime you want to that does not change anything is 1. So to show how this dividing fractions thing works, we're going to multiply by 1 in the clever form of the reciprocal of the denominator over the reciprocal of the denominator. Now that's a lot of words, so I'll show you what I mean here. I'm going to multiply this entire compound fraction by the reciprocal of the denominator. So my denominator is 3/4. The reciprocal of the denominator is 4/3. So I'm going to multiply by 1 in the form of 4/3 divided by 4/3. Now, and that's multiplication that's happening between those. 4/3 divided by 4/3 is just 1. I'm not fundamentally changing this compound fraction. I'm just working with it to make it in its acceptable form here. So multiplying by 1 in the form of 4/3 over 4/3. Now we can go back to our rules for multiplication of fractions, which just says I multiply fractions straight across, and I'm talking about the big fractions here. So we have 2/3 times the numerator 4/3 divided by 3/4 times that reciprocal 4/3. Now notice in your numerator you now have that situation of multiplying by the reciprocal setup. So it happens naturally as you begin to simplify this compound fraction. But let's complete the simplification process here. So once again, you multiply fractions straight across. So that's 2 times 4 divided by 3 times 3. Big divided by 3 times 4 divided by 4 times 3, which gives us 8/9 divided by 12/12, or 8/9 divided by, well, 12 divided by 12 is just 1, and anything divided by 1 is just itself. So we end up with 8/9. Now certainly you're not going to go through this whole process of setting up compound fractions and simplifying every time you want to divide fractions. But it's good to know where these processes come from so that you're not thinking that it's just made up to make your life miserable, as most students think with fractions. So we'll go back up to the top and see you get the same thing using the rule of we never divide fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal of the divisor. All right, so I hope that this has been helpful for you in beginning to understand how to divide fractions. If you have any other questions about multiplying or dividing, adding or subtracting fractions, make sure to ask your Highlands instructor. Thank you.